Okay everyone, so welcome to the Basel Communicators Network. Martin Daubney is here with us today and he's going to be talking to us about navigating the emotional space. So Martin, over to you.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to come along this evening. It's lovely to see people I recognise on the attendee list as well, so it takes me back to the days when I was in internal communications for some years. The question we always ask ourselves and ask of other people is, how are you? Well, clearly none of you are British, because we say not bad. And it doesn't get much better than that. And these days, if you've been there, you can understand why. But it's crazy. You know, there are 32,000 words in the English language to describe an emotion, and how are we? So the emotional landscape, part of understanding where we are in that emotional landscape, is part of emotional intelligence, and self-awareness is a part of emotional intelligence. So what I'm going to talk to you and share with you some tips and tools to take you through the emotional landscape, but also why is that important? So I'm Martin Daubney. I run a coaching company called Inspire Coaching. We have an office in Basel, currently in the shadow of two enormous towers, one of them getting bigger by the day, very close to Syngenta and the Swiss Hotel. And we've been doing that now for, wow, 10 years, pretty much, and focusing on helping people who are stressed move into that position of strength. One of the clients I had, it was in a training course for Roche, leadership training. The rate of change in her organization at the time was so fast that she described it as surfing a tornado. And try as I might, I couldn't find a picture of anyone surfing a tornado anywhere. But this one came into my feed shortly afterwards. And you can't stop these waves coming, but you can learn how to surf. As my favorite philosopher of all time, Captain Jack Sparrow, said, it's not the problem that's the problem, it's your attitude to the problem that's the problem. But first of all, you've got to figure out where you are in that problem. And the biggest thing of all is how you think about it. How you interpret it will largely dictate how you come out of it. People often think stress is a bad thing, but it can be a good thing too, and we'll come on to that later. But your thoughts about a situation actually have a huge determining effect on your behavior. I saw something the other day that actually reminded me, nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, hey, I'm going to behave really badly and take dreadful decisions today. We all try and do our best. We all want to be at our best. And if you think about that, that's a behavior that we see on the outside. That's externalized thoughts. Our thoughts dictate our behavior. If I think about something in a bad way, I will look in a bad way. You've probably all seen the Amy Cuddy video of how you can actually change your hormonal level depending on how you stand, and vice versa. But before the thought comes a feeling, and you've all had a feeling, I know you have, you've all felt either deliriously happy because you got the job that you're in, or you're angry because something didn't go the way you wanted it to be, or you've felt sadness or whatever it is. What happens is that the thought, the feeling and the thought have a tussle. Inside us in our heads, we have this constant battle going on. And if you've ever caught yourself in that loop, it's like, oh, I feel really angry, but you shouldn't be angry because you're at work and people are watching. Yeah, but I felt this is just so wrong. I need to, no, calm down. And inside your head, you've got this constant battle going on pretty much all the time. If you don't recognize that, you probably recognize that thought and feeling of, oh, that chocolate, oh, fancy that chocolate. No, you know you shouldn't have a chocolate. And before you know it, the behavior's got it into your mouth and you're enjoying that chocolate. But the feeling comes from an emotion. So the feeling isn't an emotion. The emotion generates the feeling. The feeling is the awareness of the emotion, and the emotion comes from our physiology. So there's a whole chain of events that actually externalize us and come out as behavior. And obviously we want that to be our peak performance. So if you feel as though you're fine, good, or not bad, you're not even halfway there to getting to peak performance. If you want to be at your peak performance, we need to really understand where we are emotionally. And while some people do behave like 6-year-olds, they're not always 6-year-olds. There's something else going on in the physiology and the emotion of the moment that's driving that feeling that's coming out as a 6-year-old thought and behavior. So, does anyone, now most of you are in the pharmaceutical industry, recognize what this is? Anyone in the chat? Anyone think they know? The reason I show it is because a client I was working with had to do a big important presentation to, well, about 500 people, the board, and some of the family members of the company that she was working with. And she said, oh, don't worry, I'll just take this. Well, it's benzodiazepine. She didn't say benzodiazepine, she said benzo. And I said, what, like benzodiazepine? She said, yeah, it does this. Well, I had no idea what it does. And it's readily available. Well, I was shocked, to say the least. And I'll say something in a minute that made me even more shocked. She said, don't worry, Martin, we all do it. And if someone in my team knows that I'm on my benzo, they'll come up and say, hey, which one are you on? Try one of these. It's better. I had that last week. And this whole subculture of people taking benzodiazepine at work was revealed to me. I thought, I don't think this is a good thing. You know, I'm not knocking pharma. I've worked in pharma. I am here by the miracle of modern science due to some cardiology problems. But I don't think taking a benzodiazepine for a presentation is a particularly good strategy, however you think of it. But why do people use them? Well, first of all, it reduces the anxiety, but you get all this stuff as well. You cannot possibly be at peak performance. You cannot be giving your best. And if you're sedated in some way, then you're emotionally suppressed as well. And you can't possibly be able to know where you are on the emotional landscape, figure out what you need to do to shift, and so on and so forth. There's an old adage that people who do go to the GP to get some benzos for anxiety, if you follow them up 6 months later, they still have anxiety, and now they've got an addiction to benzodiazepine. It's dreadful stuff to get off. I've spoken to several people who have been on them. They know that all this is going on in their heads, and they can't shift. They really need help to move out of this taking benzodiazepine. And the market for this is just growing. The current situation, be it at work, be it not at work, be it working from home, kids at home, change in the organization. My wife's a language trainer, and she said one of her students said, my whole floor is being let go. That's, I don't know how many people that is, but suddenly these people haven't got jobs. It's going to increase anxiety, and therefore it looks as though the benzo market is growing exponentially because of it. But there is another way. I'm here to tell you there is another way. It's because of this that I developed, here's the little plug, the Clear Your Head to Get Ahead program. We base it on psychology, of course, so you've got to figure out what triggers us and so on. There's a lot of physiology, and I back it up with some technology from HeartMath. If you've never heard of HeartMath, I'm also a HeartMath coach, and we use this little tool here to clip onto your earlobe to measure your heartbeat. And I'll come on to that in a minute as to why that's important. But it helps us understand how you're managing and how to improve your state. So, what do you think stress is? This is I find this an interesting question, because it doesn't matter if you Google it now or Google it later, you'll find maybe 20, 30 different definitions of stress. Yes, you're right. There is, whoever mentioned the eustress and good stress, there is good stress and not so good. It's, again, depends how you think about it. It's a lady called Kelly McGonigal. There's a very good TED talk of hers, The Upside of Stress, good book too. And my synopsis of her talk is that there are people who think stress is a good thing. Most of us think it's a bad thing and will do us harm. And in fact, if you have prolonged stress, somehow your body just can't keep up, and you start to suffer the adverse effects of stress. But by following people who think that stress is a good thing, and she followed them, as she puts it, all the way to the mortuary, it turns out that if you think stress is good for you, you live longer, and 10 years longer on average. And these are not 10 bad years because you think stress is fine and good for you. So you have 10 more good years. It is a thought process. So I had a quick look and had a dig around and various bodies that I respect. And it's the body's reaction to any change that requires adjustment or response. That's because we love stability. We hate change. As human beings, we just don't like change. One of my coaching mentors said once that actually, sometimes we need to change to get unstuck from where we are. And we only know that we've changed because something strange is happening. Change is strange. If it's being done to us, as one of the comments there was, then we lose that control and we become stressed because of it. Stress too is also a normal part of life. We can't get away from it, it's there. So the other side of stress, of course, if you're stressed, way to cope with it is to be resilient. So what's your thoughts on resilient? How would you describe resilient? Yeah, all very valid. The bouncing back bit is I'm glad you put to the best version of yourself, because often we think about bouncing back, but we're never the same when we come back because we've had an experience. And without doubt, any experience is going to change who and how we are. The trouble with both these words, stress and resilience, they've been applied to human psychology from physical science. They're actually words that we use to describe metals and tangible objects, how they handle stress and how resilient they are under certain thermodynamic conditions, for example. So trying to retrofit that into human physiology has been difficult. But I kind of work with this definition, and I think this one kind of probably captures everything that you're talking about just now anyway. The key part of this statement is to prepare for. Often we find ourselves in some sort of stressful situation and it's crept up on us. And the best time to prepare for it is when we're not stressed, actually. It's easier to become resilient when we're not stressed rather than test our resilience when we get there. So then once you've been through that stress, it's the capacity to recover from. So the more resilient you are, the quicker we can recover from. And sadly, people find stress so overwhelming sometimes that they take time away from work. Sometimes someone I'm working with, one of their direct reports is on their just coming back after their second year of not being at work full time. So it's quite a massive amount of time. And even those people that have recovered, I've spoken to, say that it's taken them 2 years. You talk about being back to the best version of yourself. 2 years, even, you know, coming back to work and so on, but taken 2 years to feel as though they're back to form, back on top of the game, back being able to give their best. So if we can prepare for it and not have to go through that situation, surely that's got to be better. So we can learn to build our resilience and sustain the energy. Energy is very important because if you think about it, anytime you have been stressed or you've had a stressful day or a stressful meeting, then surely you've come away going, oh my God, that was exhausting. It sucks energy out of us. And we can manage our energy in a better way, in a more positive way. And even if you do what we're going to go on to later, just before a meeting that you think may be a little bit hectic, wow, your energy will be much more sustainable through that meeting, and you'll probably give yourself a better chance of making great decisions with a clear head. So let's have a look. If you're here, although it wasn't billed as a resilience talk, you're probably self-aware already. You probably understand stress works. We've got some great comments in the chat box. You definitely spot it in others. You know when your partner or a colleague at work is stressed because, well, they're a bit short-tempered, aren't they? They can get a bit narky. Maybe they're snappy, whatever it is. Parents often say they shout at their kids more and that sort of thing. Maybe your sleep is disturbed. If you're one of these people who wakes up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning and you don't have a dog that needs to go out, you might be mulling over something at work. That's a sign that you haven't really managed your state and need to work on your resilience more. There's a lady I work with who said her whole weekend was destroyed. She went off into the mountains for a hike, and it's her favorite hike. The whole weekend, every time she shifted her attention away from the situation at work, before she knew it, she was just mulling over, and it just dragged her down, down and down. Where we want to get to is know how to self-regulate. So where are you on your emotional landscape at any one time? And then to maintain that, it's actually a nice place to be and to do the exercises. So it's not like trying to do, I don't know, 40 squats in a 5-minute period, but you know, it doesn't hurt, and it's a nice place to be. So self-maintenance is a really key and works. Now, there are 4 domains of resilience. Physical one, if you're going out jogging, if you're going to the gym, if you're doing some high interval impact training every morning with on the TV, following some guy on the TV, whatever it is you do, even if you just go for a walk, you're helping your resilience. You're helping to drop that cortisol. The cortisol, the stress hormone, the one that gets us out of the building if it's on fire, or fighting the saber-toothed tiger, that could never possibly have happened. So metaphorical. But if you're moving, you're reducing your cortisol. Cortisol has the unfortunate knack of hanging around a long time. And if it hangs around because you're stressed, then you're doing damage to your immune system, not good at the moment, your dietary system, your cardiovascular system, you're not sleeping well, and all that sort of stuff. So getting some physical activity, really, really important. Somebody mentioned flexibility earlier. So mental flexibility is super cool. The more adaptable we are, strangely, the more control we have. If anyone's studied neuro-linguistic programming, there is a law in inverted commas, no one's going to come and check up on you, that the person or system with the most flexibility of behavior actually controls the system. And if you think about it, those people that are so dogmatic and stick in the mud and have to have it their way eventually snap and break and fall over. Really, really good. That not so much that you go with the flow every time, but to have some flexibility and say, okay, well, you know, we didn't get there, but we can't do it that way. Maybe we could go another way. It's a bit like finding a roadblock physically when you're trying to drive from A to B, and finding a way around. Be flexible. Spirituality of some sort, whatever it is, not saying you have to believe in a god or gods, but some sort of realization that we are connected. And the other one there, tolerance of others' values. Again, from NLP, we talk about respecting the other person's model of the world. And I firmly believe that if we were to do that and recognize that we all see the same thing in a different way and understand that, then maybe there could be a bit less conflict going on at the moment. But it's the emotional flexibility, positive outlook and self-regulation I want to touch on a little bit more deeply today. And having all that in a good high place gives you what's known as coherence. Now, coherence has a lot to do with your heart rhythms and your emotional state and how your heart connects to your brain. The heart is the first organ to be developed in the fetus, and it stays with us right up until the end. Never maintained, never asked of anything. It just keeps doing its lub-dub. We don't have, most of the time we don't even feel it. We only really feel it if we're super angry and excited and it pumps out of our chest. So the brain actually is quite late in developing. The first part of the brain to develop is the reptilian brain, the brain stem, and that's what we're born with. And then largely 4 chunky bits of computer, if you like, with dodgy interfaces are in our skull, and they have to be programmed. And in fact, there's a lot of study to say that ladies' brains continue developing until they're about 25, 28, something like that. And for men, it's about the same, to be fair. But the heart actually has its own neurology. There is cardioneurology as a discipline, and it speaks to the brain more than the brain speaks to the heart. more messages come from the heart to tell the brain what to do than the other way around. And to be in coherence is the best state, where your brain and your heart are flowing together. Now, if you are not incoherent, if you are in incoherence, you're not coherent, your your heart rhythms fluctuate. If you go and take your heart rate now, or you've got a smartwatch and you have a look at it, maybe it's saying 60 beats a minute. And we'd like to think that's 1 beat every second, because that's kind of convenient, but that's an average. The heart rate, the difference in time between each beat changes. Well, very small, but it changes. And that's known as heart rate variability. There's a variable in the heart rate from beat to beat. The less coherent we are, the worse that pattern is. And the more coherent we are, the smoother that pattern is. And tons of studies have now been done to show that, and simple exercise I'm going to take you through very shortly, actually helps us get into that coherent state. And when you're in that coherent state, you are emotionally grounded, you're able to take clearer decisions, have a much better breathing pattern, you're going to be able to sleep more clearly, you'll have better relationships, and so on and so forth. I'm not suggesting this will all happen after one exercise, you've got to repeat it, but and we can measure this. So the technology I pointed to earlier measures this, and we can do it in real time. And if we were in the same room together, I'd get someone to have a look and we can see it, and then take you through the guided piece later. Your chart will look like the blue one at the bottom. Then I'd remind you about the report that has not yet been finished, and boom, it'll look like the red one at the top. In the moment. These thoughts affect our behavior in the moment. So, has everyone got a pen? I encourage you to draw this. It's a 2x2 grid. You should be familiar with them. You work for organizations. We always love a 2x2 grid. And at the top of the grid there, you can see 4 heartbeats. So that's implying a high heart rate. It could be produced by adrenaline. It could be produced by the sympathetic nervous system. Sorry, get those muddled up. But whatever it is, your heart rate's high. At the bottom end of that, you've got a low heart rate. That could be acetylcholine, it could be noradrenaline, it could be the parasympathetic nervous system working, whatever it is. Across the horizontal axis, look, we've got cortisol on one side. I mentioned cortisol before. It's the fight or flight freeze hormone that sticks around. It's actually quite necessary to get us up in the morning. It's at its highest first thing in the morning. And it's a good time to do a workout. If you want to wake up and do a workout, your cortisol levels will be a bit lower. Over time, unfortunately, as we get adapted to stress, we get kind of comfortable with the level of cortisol we're in. Our baroreceptors in our brain go, okay, that's the new normal. Let's set the baseline here. And it slowly creeps up. And I guarantee that if we all had a blood test for cortisol, then most of us will have higher than optimal cortisol flushing around. The opposite to that is DHEA, and even the people who work with dihydroxyepiandrosterone call it DHEA because it's quite difficult to say. You can buy it on the internet. You can actually go Amazon.com, DHEA, you can get little vials of it and take it. It's the youth hormone, but you don't need to. Don't do that. I'm going to show you why not. The interesting thing is we can either produce cortisol or DHEA. So let's see if we can get to a state where we can produce DHEA. If we're producing cortisol, we're draining our inner battery. Like I said earlier, when you had that row, had that argument, been in that difficult conversation, then, oh, I feel exhausted. Need a coffee or a beer or something. Emotions that trigger this, high heart rate emotions, things like anger, fear, anxiety. These, you know your experience. You know when you're feeding these emotions, your heart rate's high. And if you're feeling low and draining your energy and still producing cortisol, it's in the sort of burnout, withdrawal, resentment. Grief and sadness is here. Boredom is here as well. It may feel like a good place because you feel relaxed, but actually if you check in on your emotional landscape, and say, I'm quite quiet and relaxed, but how do I feel? And you happen to be over on this left-hand side, time to do something about it. And to be fair, most organizations do sit in this kind of, not extremes, but in the mid-range on the left-hand side here in the cortisol, because of so much going on, so much to do, so much uncertainty. On the other side, to boost our inner battery, we can get excited about stuff, passionate, have courage. And to really be in that calm space, find fulfillment, ease, and contentment. Love is in there, gratitude. So the anxiety and excitement are very, very close together neurologically. And this is what my wife and I look like on a roller coaster. We've only ever been on a roller coaster once. I'm the young lady full of excitement, and she's the little boy looking actually pretty much like that. Full of dread, full of fear, highly anxious, didn't enjoy it again, and said, no, we're never ever doing another roller coaster. And to her point, she up to that, never have. It didn't even have a loop in it, which is even more disappointing. But at the end of exactly the same experience, exactly the same time, in the same car, sat next to each other, her body was full of cortisol and mine was full of DHEA, because we have a choice. Anxiety and fear are very, very closely wired in our brains and produce very, very similar physiological sensing in our body as well. Heart rate goes up, little tightened stomach, so on and so forth. So my take home for you is, think of anxiety, if you're feeling anxiety or anxious, as a warning from your subconscious mind to start focusing on what you want to happen. Because all the time you're anxious, you're just looking at the danger and the might not happen. And to the point, the lady I was working with, who was speaking to the board and the 500 earlier, she was getting anxious, and she was thinking about all the things that could go wrong and all the ways that she could mess up and limit her career. And that drove the anxiety. When we switched it around, say, well, focus on what you want to happen and how it's going to happen and so on, and put it out in a future timeline, then things changed. And she did a great presentation without the need for the benzo. So, it's a matter of perspective and choice. Hard sometimes, but if you stop yourself and you know where you are on the emotional landscape, and you know that you've got heart rate coming, the best thing to do is to lean in and love it. Is to go, there you go, anxiety. Thanks for showing up. Obviously, I need to check in. I'm going to turn this into excitement. Think about what I want to happen, rather than all those things that might not happen. Two more things that are really important in shifting ourselves here. So the first one is to anchor. This is a prelude to what we're going to go through now. So anchoring is all about getting into, you can anchor all sorts of things. You can anchor time, you can anchor, depending if you're doing a presentation on the stage and all sorts of things. But for our purposes here, what I'd like you to do is to right now think of a time when you were truly at ease. Then you'll be ready for the exercise when it comes in. So if you think of that time, for me, it's when I was up at Zermatt, and we were kind of early in the season, and some of the ice ponds had melted. And Carol and I were the only two people sat on the bank of this pond with the reflection of the Matterhorn in it. And it was absolutely still and quiet, and the sun was out, and we just went, shh, and just went into this wonderful emotional state of ease. And if ever I think about calming down, that's where I take myself. So you probably have somewhere like that for you. So just make a note of that, because we're going to tap into that in a minute. Normally with anchoring, we then squeeze a hand or something. So as we think about that state, we squeeze a hand. So the next time, if we want to get there quickly, we just squeeze the hand again, and it takes us into that state. If we were doing the full program, I'd take you through it. It's quite a 20-minute or so exercise to get us into this. The other thing, and it may not surprise you, is breathing. Now, there are 101 different ways to breathe. It's highly underrated. It really needs a bit more importance, and you will be surprised the number of times you stop breathing. if you see that email coming in from that person that you really didn't want to have that email in from, and or someone's chasing you for something you haven't quite got ready, then we often find ourselves holding our breath. All of a sudden, that's not a good state to be in, because you've shifted yourself over on the left-hand side, the cortisol side, straight away. Breathing's really, really important to get the heart slowing down into that calmer state, and then focusing to get the heart and brain moving together. And the study after study have shown that just by breathing the way I'm going to describe works really, really well. I asked a couple of people, and not the right people yet, at Roche, to see if anyone would be happy to redo a study that has come out from HeartMath organization in America, and Unilever repeated it as well. But by doing the exercises, including this breathing, they demonstrated a significant drop in cortisol and an increase in DHEA in the participants that went through 30 days of doing this. So it really, really has a massive effect. Now, the breathing patterns, I've seen people suggest you need to breathe in with one nostril closed and breathe out with the other one. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's not rubbish. The in through your nose bit releases nitrous oxide, and out through the mouth. That's okay. Then there's square breathing and circular breathing and so on. All sorts of strange ways of breathing. What's really, really important is your breathing is a little slower, very important, and a little deeper. The depth of breathing, I used to say that was the thing, because it stimulates the vagus nerve and slows the heart down, but it's not so important as a little slower, a little deeper, and nice and smooth. If you're one of these people that has like a staccato breath, then try your best to smooth it out. So, little slower, a little deeper. Nice and smooth, and ideally, but certainly not pushing this, a 5 second in and a 5 second out. Nice and even in, even out. But if that's difficult for you, don't worry. Don't do it. Don't worry. So this all leads us up to the heart-focused breathing to take us into a different emotional state, moving ourselves from the left-hand side of the emotional landscape to the right-hand side, or at least as we start this process, and there's a heck of a lot more to learn, we get us to a central line. To do the exercise, most people close their eyes, and if you're happy to have your camera on and close your eyes, or turn your camera off, that's fine. But closing the eyes is the thing. As you get better at this, and as you get more practiced at this, you can do it by yourself with your eyes open. Then you start to be able to do it with your eyes open and someone else there. And it's kind of 10 steps. But when you are a master at this, believe you me, you can be in a heated meeting room and do this breathing. No one else knows you're doing it because, hey, we've got to breathe anyway. And you suddenly get this calmness come over you that then takes control of the situation, even in the worst scenario cases. So please join me. I invite you to join me. It's just 3 or 4 minutes maximum. There will be moments of quiet as I allow you to get into the state that you need to get into. But for the first bit is just close your eyes and to focus. Now, this is probably the hardest bit as well, to focus on the area of your heart and imagine your breath going in through your heart and out through your heart. Now, we know physiologically it doesn't do that, but just imagine, focus on your heart and imagine this breath going in through your heart and out through your heart. And as you do that, allow yourself to just breathe a little slower and a little deeper than normal. Focus on your heart, breathing in through your heart and out through your heart. A little slower and a little deeper. If at any time your mind wanders off to something else, just reconnect with your heart. Now I invite you to generate a genuine feeling of ease. And breathe in that ease through your heart and out through your heart. And as you breathe that feeling of ease in through the heart, just amplify it, make it bigger, and spread it out to every cell in your body. So every cell of your body is at ease. As you breathe it in through your heart and out through your heart. And as you breathe it out, breathe out that energy of ease into the room you're in and anyone else who may be around you. And breathe it back in towards and for yourself. When you've done that a couple of times, just wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, and take a nice refreshing breath in and come back in the room. And just connect with your emotional landscape if you've drawn that out and ask yourself, what do I feel now? Where am I on my emotional landscape? The studies have shown the next time you're in a team meeting, if you feel brave enough, see if you can get the team to do this. You know, studies have shown teams that start off team meetings like this are much more productive. They're much more creative, and the dialogue seems to flow better. So I don't know where you are in your teams and whether or not you feel you have the psychological safety to do that. You may need a woo-woo buzzer in the middle of the room for someone to hit to say, I'm not doing this. But, you know, the more my belief is that the more we do this, the better for not only ourselves and our families, but for our work colleagues too. In Holland, the Royal Dutch Police Force have all gone through the training and bring a different energy to very nasty situations sometimes and keep control in a nicer way. The Dutch are very nice people anyway, but it's just one of those, somehow they bring a different energy to very potentially conflicting situations. And they also prepare for, so it's before they get out and get ready, and then after any incident could be traumatic, they recover from using some of these techniques. So very, very useful psychologically to build resilience and to know where we are. Now, if you can't quite remember how to do what we've just done, because the lady I spoke about earlier with the benzos worked in a lab, I said, well, hey, we can make an acronym. Got to have an acronym. And it's the lab test. So we all know what labs are, and we've all had lab tests, and we've all been in labs probably. So lab test, the L stands for recognizing and loving that negative emotion. So if something comes up in you, where am I on my emotional landscape? Is it on the draining side, okay, acknowledge it. I'm not ever saying ignore it. Acknowledge it, but don't fight it. If you fight it, you give it energy and it seems to grow and get worse. So love that negative emotion and thank it for showing up, because clearly it's getting you ready for something, which you can then shift into something that gives you energy. The A stands for fire that anchor. So get yourself into that wonderful state, that state of calm, ease. And if you were to progress with this, we move into different states for different reasons and for different techniques. And then the B is to breathe. Make sure that breath is nice and slow. When people say calm down, take a deep breath. Well, first of all, telling anyone to calm down is probably the worst thing you can do. But they don't mean take a deep breath. They mean take a slow breath. Well, they mean take a deep breath, but actually they should say take a slow breath. The slower the breath, the better. In fact, our heart rates change. In the in-breath, it speeds up slightly. On the out-breath, it slows down slightly. So just keep it nice and even, nice and slow, and breathe. So then you fire your anchor. Then you do your breathing. And just 2 to 3 minutes a day, 3 times a day, will shift you over a period of 30 days, will give you a real shift in where you are. If you keep notes, keep your emotional landscape to hand, plot out where you are, plot out what's going, you'll probably find over a 30-day period, if you do this morning, midday, and the evening, that your mood and your stress levels will go down and your resilience levels will come up. One of the first times of the day to do this would be as you wake up. I've actually been instructed to do that by my watch, which is quite nice. And I see my heart rate variability improving. And then going to bed, if you're one of these people that struggles to sleep, this is a very, very useful technique to just focus on the heart, slow the breathing down, and you'll probably drift off. And if you want a third one, then around lunchtime. But, you know, like I said, this breathing is highly underrated. You can do it anywhere. You can do it on the tram going into work. You can do it at your desk. You can do it anytime, anywhere, because it's breathing, isn't it? So that's it. I have an offer. A thank you for being here on this Thursday evening. But part of what I work with is stress and wellness and resilience. And there is an online assessment for you to take. It's 72 questions, takes about 20 minutes to do. It's only in English, I'm afraid. If you would like to take this, please just either send me an SMS with where I need to send it to. I do need your email address. I set it up in a platform. It comes out, you do it, I get notified. And then here's the promise you have to make, is that you're going to sit through 30 minutes debrief. And then after the debrief, I send you your report to keep. All as a thank you, complimentary, because this stuff's important.